Hey guys, Eli here. Hope you're all doing well. Here to talk about Weapons, a movie I've been waiting quite a while to see. Um, Actually, I just saw it in the theater for the second time, so yeah, I've seen it twice now. And Weapons is a 2025 American film written and directed by Zach Cregger and stars Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, Alden Ehrenreich, and Amy Madigan. And the plot follows a third grade teacher that showed up to work one morning only to find 17 of her 18 students had gone missing the night before with no real leads at all as to where they went, pretty much leaving her in the town's crosshairs as the number one suspect. And I'll start by saying that I think the Zach Cregger is one of the more interesting voices in horror currently. I don't know about you guys, especially considering that he was formerly known for comedy. And it's his writing that really interests me above all else, I think. And you guys know how I like my fleshed out characters. We got that with Zach's previous film Barbarian, which I was a big fan of, and we get even more of that here. I mean, the characters here are even more diverse. And I know that he only produced Companion from this year. You know, I've talked about that film a lot. It's probably still my favorite so far. But I do wonder, after seeing Weapons, I do wonder if he had more input. Because to me, Companion has a similar style and feel. I don't know, what do you guys think? Is it just me again? So out of the more important characters in this film, there's like five or six or something like that get their own story arcs that eventually kind of intertwine, with some or all of the other characters. Most are connected with just one or two of the other characters in some way. And every character has a scene that you can see through the other character's point of view, even after you've already seen it through that specific character, if that makes any sense. And don't get me wrong, this has obviously been done before, but the way it was done here was really cool and probably at least a little bit unique. The storytelling was really fun for me because I need an actual story and a world that I can get lost in. By the time this is over, you know a lot about these characters. You know their personalities and flaws because we all have them, even though those of us that try harder to be good people, we're still flawed. And Justine is the lead here, played by Julia Garner, and this is the best I've ever seen her. She is the third grade teacher I was talking about, and she is in a ridiculously tough position. 17 kids go missing the same night. They're all linked to her. The only kids missing in this town are all from her class and nobody else's. But she's just as confused as everyone else in town. She doesn't even really have anything to say. And of course, the parents are super angry. Who wouldn't be suspicious of her? You can see it through their eyes as well. But the thing is, she is a good teacher, and she does care about those kids. They were her life. Justine's a good person, flaws and all, and she definitely has, she's got a few of them. She's got, a problem with alcohol, with a DUI under her belt. Not a good look for a school teacher, especially under these, circumstances. And Alex is the one kid from her class I was talking about who didn't go missing. And him, along with Justine, have been interviewed extensively by literally everybody. And literally no leads came from either of them, not one. They simply just don't know anything. Weird things have been going on with Alex, though. All of a sudden, both of his parents have became mysteriously sick. And his great aunt Gladys, who he's never really even heard of, recently has came to stay with them. Meanwhile, Justine is suspended at work, while investigations continue and all that. And she begins to kind of snoop around. She feels restless. Who wouldn't? After the police are really, they're just unable to find literally anything, and it's not their fault either. And she's got a police officer ex-boyfriend named Paul, who brings also an interesting dynamic here, because a lot of these characters are pretty minor, yet has an important contribution in driving the story forward in their own way, and Paul is no exception. So Paul is now engaged to a woman, and he also struggles with alcoholism like Justine. Probably, I imagine, why him and her are no longer together, or at least a big part of it. And from what we get to see, I think Paul is a decent dude. But his life is kind of a mess, and I believe that he's trying to navigate it as best as he can, while leaving messes consistently behind him, and I can so relate to that. And he ends up meeting this young heroin addict who's also kind of spiraling out of control while trying to keep his shit together. And at the same time, looking for ways to make quick cash to feed his addiction and all that. And that leads him to Alex's house, which appears to be empty, so he goes inside to snoop around. And the second most important character, in my opinion, is Archer, played by Josh Brolin. I always like Josh Brolin. He's a veteran actor. He's been acting for 40 years now. And he's really good as Archer. As always, he is, I think. So he's the father of one of the missing kids, one of Justine's kids. And he is kind of like the one parent that just really refuses to give up or rest while his son is gone. He seems to be taking it the hardest, and he seems to be, the one that just refuses to sit still while no progress seems to happen. You can tell his marriage has become strained, and it felt a bit real to me for at least this one scene where you see him sleeping alone in his kid's room, and that scene kind of about broke my heart as a fellow dad. And he's got his sights currently set on Justine. There's just something about her that for him, he can't make sense of it, and it just doesn't sit right. He doesn't want to hurt her or anything like that, but he wants to follow her around and, see if maybe she's up to something suspicious. And, you learn a lot about him when he actually, there's a scene where he actually saves Justine from an attacker, despite not trusting her at all, despite not even really liking her. And this told me a lot about him, his character. He saw someone in trouble and he helped. Another area where this film excels is the cinematography. I'm thinking about it. And I looked it up, and it's a guy named Larkin Seipel, who worked on stuff like Swiss Army Man, really good movie, Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm not really into that one, but he also worked on Everything Everywhere All at Once. So he just made everything here look really, really good. He makes this film feel alive, and whatever vibe was needed for any scene, he nails it perfectly every time. But that said, there are a lot, and I'm not the first person to say this, there are a lot of very dark scenes that were a bit disorienting, which was maybe the point, but because you did feel like you were in a dark room. It felt creepy, but those scenes, I think would have been better if you could have seen them. So Weapons is definitely a horror film, but even more than Barbarian, I think it incorporates other elements like dark comedy, and it also kind of like a mystery thriller. And last but not least, this movie has a villain, which I haven't really talked about because I don't want to spoil anything in that area. I will say that this villain kind of reminded me of Longlegs in the way that, you're kind of left with more questions than were answered. And I'm okay with that. We always want to know more, but sometimes less is more. The overall vibe of this film is maybe the best part for me too. The writing is so good that at times you forget that it is a horror film and you don't really care. Everywhere the story went, every turn that it took, I was just on board. It's not super scary overall, but there are a few creepy scenes. One in particular, I think you'll know what I mean when you see it. It's also not a consistently violent film, but there are a few brutal scenes, both of them that I'm thinking of involving the same character. And one of those scenes actually involves somebody getting their face just like slowly caved in, which was like new French extreme levels of violence. And the gore effects are top notch. And I felt like the third act was kind of influenced by old zombie movies, and even like old Italian cannibal films, even if Weapons is literally neither of those. But watch that final scene and tell me that you didn't notice or that you didn't pick up on those vibes. But anyways, I'm giving Weapons an 8 out of 10, man. I don't know if I would call it my favorite horror film of the year, but it very well might be the best so far, if that makes any sense. And I just can't wait to see what Zach Cregger does next, which apparently will be a Resident Evil movie next year, from what I've read, which is kind of fucking disappointing, but I'll give it a watch for Zach. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex.